When you are ready, Madam Mayor.
Good evening, everyone. We are back from a 23-minute break after executive session where no decisions were made. We are now called to order. Roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen.
Here.
Councilmember Mattson.
Here.
Councilmember Vargas.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Bell.
Here.
Councilmember Costello.
Here.
And Councilmember Carlson is not here.
We have a motion to excuse Councilmember Carlson, who is at a business meeting out of town.
To excuse Councilmember Carlson.
Mike second.
It's been moved by Kevin to excuse Russ, a second by Mike. All those in favor? Opposed? Councilmember Carlson has been excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and continue standing for prayer with Pastor Alicia from Nazarene Church in Selah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Almighty God, bless all the leaders of our land, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to others. To the President and members of Cabinet, to governors of states and mayors of cities, and to all in administrative authority, we pray that you would grant wisdom and grace in the exercise of their duties. To senators and representatives and those who make our laws in states and cities and towns, we pray, Lord, that you would give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people, to fulfill our obligation in the community. To judges and officers of our courts, we pray that you would give understanding and integrity, that true justice may be served for all people. And Lord, we specifically pray for those who hold office in the state of Washington and the city of Selah. We pray for wisdom and generosity and love and courage and justice, that with steadfast purpose, they may faithfully serve in their offices and make wise decisions for the well-being of our whole community. Give grace to your servants, Lord. Keep them under your care. Have mercy on us and guide us in your ways. Teach us to rely on your strength, God, to accept our responsibilities to our fellow citizens, that we may faithfully serve you by loving our neighbor. We pray all these things through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Alicia. Agenda changes. We're removing item N3 as it is not an unnecessary action. Public appearances, introductions, and presentations. We have Katrina Hinkle with the Downtown Association.
Good evening, everyone. Few things to go through here, so bear with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. The Selah Chamber is sponsoring a trick or treat from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Selah Middle School on Halloween. So if you're a business or someone that wants to go and just hand out candy, it'll be a drive-through just like last year. Hopefully next year we'll be back to downtown and the businesses. Just don't forget ballots are due for council on November 2nd, and the pool is on the back. So, you know, whatever way you vote, just vote. The STA is having their annual awards show on November 2nd, also at Tailgaters at 5:30. We have invited all of City Council and quite a few members of city leadership. If you guys could just respond to those emails or let me know if you didn't get them, and let me know if you're able to make it so that I can get a head count. That would be super helpful. There's Small Business Saturday coming up on November 27th. If the SDA catches you shopping small between 9 and 2 in the downtown area, we will be giving away prizes to say thank you for supporting our small businesses. We are also going to do a little holiday market in the old Wells Fargo building parking lot. So any vendors that don't have a storefront in Selah that are local can take part in the Small Business Saturday. We realize everybody wants to be able to capture some of those sales. There is a police town hall on December 2nd at 6:30 at the Civic Center. There's a lighted parade December 3rd at 6 p.m. through downtown Selah. We're going back to the traditional way of doing things for the lighted parade. So it's kind of exciting to see that happening. And at the end of the lighted parade at the Civic Center, I heard Santa will be lighting Selah's Christmas tree. So I don't know, that's kind of exciting as well. December 4th, there's a class to make those evergreen gnomes that you saw in our planter boxes last year at Wixom Park at 1:30. It's $25 a gnome, and you can go to our website at selahdowntown.org and buy however many gnomes you want to make. So we have your supplies ready for you. It'll be, you can take, you pay, show up. We'll have all the supplies, and you can take your little porch decorations with you. So I think, oh, and thank you to all of our B&O sponsors. It was exciting everything's exciting. It was exciting to max out the contributions we were allowed to receive. So we're just working on getting all those checks in, and we can start doing so many things in Selah. Anyways, is there any questions? Was a lot. Reach out to me. I'll see some of you tomorrow, hopefully at the Community Council Forum in my office from 2 to 4. So community is welcome to come on in if they have any questions, and hopefully I'll see some of you council members.
Thank you, Katrina. Getting to know our business, we have none. Communications, oral, we have none, and written, we have none. Proclamations and announcements, we have none. Consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. Should any council member request that any item on the consent agenda be considered separately, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and become part of the regular consent agenda. Roger?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Roger, a second by Jackie. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Teresa, please read the consent agenda.
Approval of minutes, October 12th council meeting, approval of claims and payroll. Ordinance 06, ordinance amending the 2021 budget for an irrigation water rights transfer, changes and transfer feasibility study. Sorry for my mistake there. Item number 07, ordinance amending the 2021 budget for the purchase of a 2008 international dump truck. And item number 08, ordinance amending the 2021 budget for architectural design services for a Law and Justice Center.
Thank you. Public hearings, resolutions, and ordinances. We have Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will go ahead and state that this is an item for a closed record public hearing to consider the City of Selah Planning Commission's recommendation regarding a comprehensive plan, future land use and zoning map amendment for the property located in the vicinity of Natchez and 4th Street from semi-public open space to commercial and residential single-family R1 to business general B2. The Planning Commission held its open record public hearing on this matter and recommended approval. We had 0 public comments for or against this particular application. And the staff's recommendation and Planning Commission recommendation for this item is for approval of this comprehensive plan map amendment
ordinance and rezone ordinance. I will turn it over before we open up the public hearing to Mr. Rob Case to talk to you about some of the procedures with regard to closed record public hearings.
Okay, council, this is going to be a quasi judicial hearing. Because it's a quasi judicial hearing, it's an evidentiary hearing that then can lead to a decision. Your decision, if any, needs to be based upon the written evidence and the oral evidence that's presented to you, and nothing else, meaning no biases or prejudices or just opinions you might have. In addition, if any of you have had any ex parte communications, that means communications with just one side in regards to the matter that's before you, you need to disclose that now at the start of this hearing before we get deep into it. You should also disclose whether any of you have attempted to view the site in question, whether any of you have any specialized knowledge that could be relevant to this matter, whether any of you have prejudged this matter and reached any conclusions, or whether any of you have any connection to the applicant in this matter, either financially or on a friendly basis or on a familial basis. And also, finally, if any of you believe there's any other relevant information that you possess that might bear upon your fitness to be impartial today, you should disclose that. So I will now open it up to the council members as to whether each of you have any of those obstacles, meaning whether any of you have had an ex parte communication, have prejudged this matter, have any prejudices about this matter, or any connection to this matter. If you do have so, or have something you would like to offer, please raise your hand. I'm seeing no hands raised. Please proceed, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Case. As I indicated previous, this particular public hearing is regarding a land use matter. It is actually a city-owned piece of property. The city has taken this matter through environmental review, public comment, notice to the surrounding property owners within a 600-foot radius. And as such, we received no public comments from either party. We did have several people that contacted us via phone, and one person that submitted in a letter that had no information on it. Literally, it was a letter with a blank piece of paper and just the person's address on it, and that was it for this particular application. This application is in support of the city's efforts to move forward to rezone its piece of property to support a law and justice center with other city functions that it is currently pursuing with one of the city's law and justice committees. And finally, the Planning Commission held their open record public hearing on this matter on October 5th, 2021, and they recommended approval of both the rezone and the comprehensive plan map amendment change. And therefore, staff is recommending that you hold a public hearing, take any testimony, and then consider the ordinance at the end of this item.
Thank you, Jeff. So we are now going to open a closed public hearing to consider the City of Selah Planning Commission's recommendations regarding the comprehensive plan, future land use and zoning map amendment for property located in the vicinity of Natchez Avenue and 4th Street from semi-public open space to commercial and residential, single family R1 to business and general B2. Questions from council?
Any members of the public?
Members of the public, please remember you'll need to raise your hand if you'd like to speak on this matter so that I know you'd like to talk and can give you permissions to do so. I do not see any, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we will now close the public, we will now close the closed public hearing and move forward. So we're now going to O1, which is Cliff.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt the accompanying ordinance approving the comp plan future land use map amendment and rezone that parcel to future adopting and further adopt Selah Planning Commission's findings, conclusions and recommendations of October 5th.
Thank you, Cliff. We have a motion to approve by Cliff. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Cliff, a second by Mike.
I think it was Roger.
Was that Roger? Okay, by Roger, thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, roll call, Teresa. Oh, I'm sorry, Suzanne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A thought I had about this lot, I see when I drive by that it's predominantly used somewhat as a quasi dog park. And it seems to get a lot of use from our residents. So I just kind of wanted to put a thought out there that in the future we consider maybe an actual dog park in a different location, because it certainly appears that a desire in our community is there for it. And I think it will be well used if we do.
Thank you. Okay, the motion to approve by Cliff, the second by Roger. Roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. L2, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a closed record public hearing to consider the City of Selah Planning Commission's recommendation regarding a comp plan, future land use map amendment and zoning map amendment for property that's located at 705 and 705.5 Bartlett Avenue. The designation is changing from low density residential to medium density residential for the comprehensive plan, and single family residential to two family residential with regard to zoning. The property is currently occupied by a duplex or a structure that has been built as a duplex in a single family residential neighborhood. By way as a findings of fact here, the application was submitted by Scott and Victoria Catron, who had submitted this application to make the change in the future land use map, mainly for the fact that the property is existing, what we would call legal non-conforming. In other words, the duplex type use that they have for the existing property when it was built prior to our zoning changes that have taken place on this property over time, make it to where that they can no longer, if the property was damaged or destroyed, rebuild that back as it was prior. All of our records on this matter seem to indicate that when we look at the surrounding neighborhood, and Teresa, I don't know if you can go to the screen share and show that property. What you find is that this is a lone duplex, on the end of a roadway that is surrounded by all single family homes. But when we looked at the compatibility, we did not receive any negative public comments from the surrounding properties or land uses. And furthermore, the years that all the surrounding houses were built actually are newer than when the duplex was constructed. So all of these neighbors understand that this has been a duplex and always will be a duplex. There isn't sufficient room for them to add on to this to make it anything more than what it is right now today. So we're just recognizing with this particular application the pre-existence of a duplex in an R1 neighborhood by giving it the appropriate R2 zoning and medium density residential. And just with the same as the other applications, the Planning Commission held their public hearing on this with the other two comp plan amendments that we're going to talk about on October 5th, 2021. We conducted environmental review on the proposed changes, and that was issued on 9/13 of 2021. And again, notice in the paper went out and to all the 600-foot radius folks in the surrounding neighborhood. And the planning department received 0 public comments for or against this proposal. Therefore, based upon the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval, staff is also recommending that you hold the public hearing and recommend approval and adopt the ordinance making the comp plan and zoning changes identified previously. And then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Case and the council to make any disclosures with regard to this application prior to us opening the public hearing.
For council, this is another quasi judicial hearing, so the same provisos I gave you before apply. If any of you have any potentially disqualifying situations, you should disclose that now, meaning any ex-parte communications with either side about this, any financial stake in this, familial or family connection to this, or any other basis by which you believe you would not be fully impartial. If any of you have such, would you please raise your hand? I see no hands raised. Go ahead, Mr. Peters.
That concludes the staff report. I can have Teresa bring up the property again if the council has questions or wants to see it, maybe what the zoning is or the comp plan designation of the surrounding properties. I can certainly do that now, or we can wait until council discussion after the mayor opens up the public hearing and allows anybody who wants to speak on this matter. So, Madam Mayor, it seems like we want to open the public hearing.
Okay. We're now opening a closed public hearing for discussion on this.
Teresa, also the patrons, I believe, have either zoomed into the meeting and may want to speak, but they were the only people who appeared at this public hearing.
So I see a Kendall Carlton, which matches the website you wanted me to pull up, but I don't have a Catron listed in the participants, in the attendees.
That's probably them.
Would you like me to give them permission to talk?
Yes, please.
Ms. Carlton, you are available to talk if you can.
Yes. There.
When you're ready.
I think you muted yourself there. There you are.
Yep. Jeff, I think I did. Yep. You hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Okay. Jeff, I'm sorry. Is it can Scott and I talk?
Yes, you can.
Okay, just listen to what you said, and I don't think there's anything else really. It was beautifully said. We just, like you said, this property was built way back in 1926 before there were any type of zoning, anything. This just came to our attention when we talked to our insurance agent, who realized that it was zoned what we think kind of, is improperly. It really, we feel, is just kind of a housekeeping issue. We cannot rebuild if something unfortunately were to happen to this. We had no idea this was zoned R1. We would have absolutely just assumed it was R2 since it was a duplex. So we really just want to kind of clean that up and be able to rebuild if, God forbid, something happened. And just be able to protect ourselves, protect kind of everybody involved with getting this to an R2, since in fact it is a duplex versus an R1.
Thank you, Kendall. Council? Okay, well, seeing no comments from council, we will now close the closed record public hearing. Council, what is your desire here? Mike?
You're muted, Mike.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the long here, so the consideration for the Planning Commission's recommendation regarding the comprehensive plan, future land use and zoning map amendment for property located at 705 and 705 and a half Bartlett Avenue, from low density residential to medium residential, single family R1 to residential 2-family R2.
Is Kevin a second?
We have a motion to approve by Mike, a second by Kevin. Is there any discussion, council? Cliff?
I just have a quick question. With this neighborhood being designated low density residential and with this one parcel becoming R2, there are other older homes. I didn't realize that they were newer than this particular one, but there are other older homes in the neighborhood. Does this precedent affect any future kinds of things if there are other parcels in that area that want to rebuild to duplex by replacing their single family?
No, this really just recognizes that particular use. There is always a chance with zoning that, if you allow one property to change its zoning to a higher density, that it allows the opportunity for someone to, say, for example, want to go and add on or change an existing structure to a higher density. However, it doesn't mean that it's granted. It would have to go through the same process that this particular application went through, which would be the city would look at differently, because it's not like the use has already been there and you're recognizing it. You're trying to go back and trying to upsize the zoning or to increase the zoning and the density. And generally speaking, the neighborhood is going to have an opportunity to voice their opinion with regard to that proposal of that application, such as the next public hearing that we're going to see.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Mike, a second by Kevin. Roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you. L3, Mr. Peters.
All right. This is the third closed record public hearing to consider the City of Selah's Planning Commission's recommendation regarding the comprehensive plan future land use map and zoning map amendments for property that's located at 310 West Selah Avenue. This is just across from Wixon Park. And the request is to go from moderate density residential to high density residential with regard to the future land use map designation and the comp plan, and then to change the zoning from 2-family residential to multifamily residential zoning. Before I get into the details, I'll just as Mr. Case did for the other two, I'll ask if there's any conflict of interest, any site viewing of the site, or anything that you think that would disqualify you from speaking and deciding this application.
Jackie?
Looks like
I just wanted to state that before the previous owners sold this property, I did look at it. I don't know if that matters, but I thought I would speak up.
no, I think that's fine. Okay, without seeing.
Just to clarify that, I assume when you say you looked at it, you meant you examined the property relative to potentially purchasing it,
That is correct.
and you did not, it is my understanding, examine the property relative to the proposed comp plan amendment or anything in regards to its zoning. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right. With seeing no others, I'll move on here. So again, Teresa, if you want to bring up the map so the council can see where this property is located, I'll go through the rest of the agenda here. So by way of background, on July 29th, 2021, the applicant, which is Thomas R. Durant, PLSA Engineering and Surveying, on behalf of the property owners, which is 310 Partners LLC, submitted the application for this comprehensive plan map amendment and rezone to multifamily residential. The property owners are requesting to change the future land use map designation for the two tax parcels from moderate residential to high density residential, and then from R2 to R3 zoning. And for the main purpose to allow for higher density development of the subject property to be developed at a future date and or applicant. So you can see that on this aerial photograph of the property, one of the properties, the property here that Teresa has highlighted, which is 11437. And then the one next to it is the other one that is owned by 310 Partners. If you want to just scroll the wheel down just to the bottom, Teresa, on the aerial photograph itself.
I'm sorry, on this part or down here?
Right there, there you go. And just a little bit there. You can kind of see the whole entire neighborhood here. Go ahead and click off that box and then slide down on the right-hand side on the layers list.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see Selah zoning right there. Check the little box.
Right here?
Yep.
Okay.
There you go. So this is predominantly what the properties around this area are zoned as. One of the things, because this is our only application that we had this year that really changes property for future use, we wanted to look and see what the compatibility was of the different structures that were here in the different zoned areas. So you can see that right now it's already moderate density residential. This primarily allows duplexes to be built in these zoned areas. And then if you want to go ahead and turn off that zoning again for me really quick, Teresa. One of the things we did is the planning department went and canvassed the area using the GIS tool that Teresa is using right now to look into the assessor's information, to look at all of the different structures, the unit types and dwelling unit types in this entire block area on both sides of the road. And what we found is that, and you can see the results in the staff report, is that although there are a fair amount of single family homes and duplexes, there are just as many multifamily structures that are in this particular neighborhood as well. One of the things we also noticed was that in and around the subject properties, a lot of the single family homes that are left in this neighborhood are not in good condition. I would say they're moderate to declining. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to where, why one is kept better than the other. We further looked into some of the different zoning designations that we had and the amount of R3 property that the city has in its inventory right now that is undeveloped. And if you want to scroll out a bunch, Teresa, here, go one more, and then go ahead and turn on the zoning. And if you can scroll, click on the map and then drag the mouse to the north.
That way?
Yep.
Okay.
And keep going.
Okay.
So if you look, council, to the left, you'll see those two blue areas on the left-hand side of the map. And there's in between it is sandwiched this kind of brown zoning area. That's our R3 zoning. That is up on, I believe it's 5th Avenue is where that's butted up against. And the property's topography climbs up quite a bit and goes up the hill. So a large part of that R3 property is not buildable. And so that really, those two pieces of property are the only two pieces of property that aren't, that are left virtually undeveloped right now, that needs to sustain the city's growth pattern for multifamily development, for apartment uses and things like that. For the next, 20-year comprehensive plan that we had adopted in 2017. So coupled with the fact that it looks like that the neighborhood is in a little bit of state of decline, and there's already multifamily dwelling units throughout that block area, and the fact that we do not have a significant amount of R3 property that is developable, the Planning Commission felt that this proposed rezone change is well warranted, and it would allow the city to have some property that could be developed in the future into apartments to meet our goals and policies of our comp plan to provide affordable housing throughout the city of Selah. I would note that unlike the other two, we did have one neighborhood comment by Kevin Imson that the Planning Commission did go, and we read into the record his letter and provided that to the Planning Commission. So they took his comments into consideration with their recommendation of approval. But other than the one single comment letter, that was the only comment that we had, and Mr. Imson did not appear on the Zoom meeting. With that being said, I'll open it up for any questions that you might have of me. I will just say that in closing, though, that the Planning Commission is recommending approval of this proposal, as well as staff.
Jeff, also Mr. Durant is here. Looks like he might have phoned in and is on his computer if you wanted me to give him permission to talk.
Yeah, so if, I guess once we open up the public hearing, if you want to open him up to be able to talk right off the bat, that'd be
Okay.
great.
Okay, sorry about
Unless
that.
there's any other council member that wants to speak or have a question before we do that. All right, I guess seeing none, go ahead and open that up.
Okay, so we are now opening the closed record public hearing. And Teresa, you're gonna let Tom speak, right?
I am, yeah. It looks like he's in 2 different ways. So let me just see if I
Okay.
can get him of permissions here. Mr. Durant, bear with me 1 second here. If he's using his phone for audio, it's going to take 1 second to connect.
Yeah, I think
And-
that's the case.
Yeah, and then just make sure, Mr. Durant, that you unmute, please. Sorry, Jeff, I gave him permission. Oh, here he is. Go ahead, Mr. Durant.
We can't hear you, Tom. Can you unmute him, Teresa?
I can ask him to unmute, but I can't do it for him.
Maybe try on the phone line and see if it will.
I did. I gave him permission for both. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, sorry about that.
I've never done it over the phone. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, it just takes a second, but it doesn't look like we might have any luck.
Well, while we're waiting for Tom, council, do you have any questions? Discussion on this, Suzanne?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm hoping, Jeff, that you could give me some clarification of the technical differences between the moderate and high density, specifically maybe how many units, I'm assuming. And then I'm also curious if there are height restriction differences between the R2 versus the R3.
So basically, yeah, in the R3 zoning district, there isn't a height restriction. The density is limited by the lot coverage and the amount of parking required. Generally speaking, it's 13 plus dwelling units per net residential acre is what is allowed in the R3 zoning district. But usually when you apply your 80% lot coverage in the R3 requirement, and then your, I want to say it's 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, that the combination of that open space, the requirements for your parking vastly limit the amount of dwelling units that you can and build on that particular parcel. And then you also have to account for any right of way that's being taken for expansion of the roadway system. In this case, there is a I'll call it a half street improvement, I guess, for a road that goes and accesses back into that development. So there would need to be some dedication of right of way off that property as well, which would also eat into the amount of dwelling units allowed on that particular parcel.
Thank you. And what is the height restriction on the R2?
If I remember correctly, I believe it's 35 feet.
Thank you.
And just so you know, the 35 feet, you could, depending upon your roof style and everything, you could possibly get 3 stories in at that level, depending upon how it's designed and everything. Any other questions from council or?
On the, is this Tom that just came down on the bottom of our screen?
I thought that was Dale, but
56900?
that is Tom's number. Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, can you hear us? So Jeff, it doesn't sound like we're gonna get him on here.
We wouldn't need his, he doesn't necessarily have to testify in this matter unless the council is going to recommend denial of the application. Then we would probably need him to allow him an opportunity to speak on this matter. So we can wait and see if there is if there's a motion for approval. If not, I can try to go and call him on my desk phone and see if you can pick him up over my speakerphone.
Okay. Council, do we have a motion to approve this from anybody?
We're still in an open.
Oh, I'm sorry, we are. So Jeff, I would need to close the closed public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to close the closed public hearing. And we'll see if Tom can get on here. But council, do you have a recommendation? Roger?
I move to approve the zoning change from R2 to R3.
Thank you.
I second that.
So we have a motion to approve by Roger, a second by Jackie. Any discussion, council? Suzanne?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have some concerns over the possibility of a very tall building being built among what's to me looks like predominantly single story and kind of larger lot homes. I think it could be an eyesore, and I think it could also be a detriment to the property values that are immediately surrounding it. I prefer to see the R3 zoned to what's already the R3 or specifically along the hill line, because I think that doesn't have the issue of the eyesore part when it's hit by the hill. Those are just kind of my thoughts. A question I had though is related to the parking by the park. I'm concerned that would become basically apartment parking. Are there any hour restrictions currently on that, or would we consider adding some if not?
There isn't any hour restrictions on that parking that I know of, unless I'm incorrect, and I know Joe will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But if there is a problem with parking, when and if this property is developed, which we don't know how it's going to be developed or the style of dwelling units are going to be on that parcel at this point in time, the city would go and utilize its police force to go out and document where those people are coming from and parking there, and possibly ticket them, or if we need be, and then we would use code enforcement to go after the property owner to ensure that the people are parking at those apartment units. What I can tell you too is with R3 and Councilman Mattson can also attest to this, but the city's standard for parking for apartment units used to be 1.5 units per dwelling unit. And so I want to say it was 2 years ago that we went through a zoning amendment and to increase that, because we recognize that with apartment units, there's more and more people are driving and having multiple people with vehicles. So this increased the standard to a whole entire another parking stall, and we round up, if we're at a fraction of a unit. So it generally should provide enough parking for all of the people who are living in those apartment units.
Thank you.
Welcome. I think it's roll call, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I was looking to see if Tom was on here. Okay, so we have a motion to approve by Roger, a second by Jackie. Roll call, Teresa?
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
No.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
No.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello.
No.
Madam Mayor, we have a tie.
Okay, and I am allowed to break this tie. Is that correct, Rob?
Yes, that is correct. But if you give me 1 second here, I'll pull up the statute.
Okay,
I'll try. Didn't you say, Jeff, that this would be a reason for Mr. Durant to be able to talk, or have we passed that?
Yes, if the mayor does not break the tie in approval, then yes, we would need to get him back on here. I will also say to the council members that are voting in opposition to the Planning Commission's findings of fact, if this is a no vote, the Planning Commission members who voted in opposition will need to go and create their own findings stating where and why they find fault with the Planning Commission's findings of fact and with regard to the approval criteria for comprehensive plan and map amendments.
Okay, are we considering action item O3?
Yes.
yes,
So that is a proposed ordinance. So in reality, Madam Mayor, you are not allowed to cast the tie-breaking vote. The applicable RCW is RCW 35A.12.100, and a sentence that appears about in the middle of this probably 15 or so line paragraph. That sentence reads, "The mayor shall preside over all the meetings of the city council when present, but shall have a vote only in the case of a tie in the votes of the council members with respect to matters other than the passage of any ordinance, grant, or revocation of a franchise or license, or any resolution for the payment of money."
so we have a tie vote.
The tied vote would mean that the ordinance has not been validly approved because a majority of the quorum has not voted in favor of passage.
Madam Mayor, I think Jeff's trying to get Mr. Durant on the phone.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I have Tom Durant on speakerphone. I'm going to have him try to speak loud and
Okay.
blast me out here so you all can hear me, or hear him, I mean. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Yes, they can hear you.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to agree with Jeff. I think the Planning Commission made findings that supported the amendment. In my notes and in the summary that they gave the Planning Commission is that I really found no inconsistency with the comprehensive plan. It is in an area that is already characterized by and as Jeff said in his presentation, characterized by a mixture of single-family and multiple-family residential development. There's a number of multifamily structures in the vicinity, and as well as some R3 zoning. And there's a need for this type of housing and a lack of available R3 zone land in the city. And that's, again, one of the statements that Jeff was making, is that virtually all of the R3 zone land, and there isn't a lot in Selah, is already developed, or in a few cases is steep, so steep that it's limiting. Speaking to the building height, I think it's real important to remember that the other aspects of the code is pretty much limits building height, because you have to provide for on-street parking, you have to provide for landscaping, you have lot coverage. Those factors are going to limit the actual height that a structure can be provided. If you look at other existing developments, and as well as in the city of Yakima, there's really very little R3 that would be more than say 35 feet, maybe somewhat more, but it's limited. That's the only way you can really start putting high rises in, is if you get into a situation where you can justify putting underground parking garages to meet the parking standards. So I think that just the overall need is probably the main factor. The lack of R3 zoning, the need for this type of housing based on growth and very low vacancy rates, and the suitability of this site being generally a mixed density area, as well as very close to services and amenities in downtown. And then the last thing I want to say, just to reemphasize what I think staff said, which is that if the council feels that this is not approvable, I think you're going to need to make some findings that specify how this the planning commission's recommendation isn't valid. That's what I have to say.
All right, thank you, Tom.
The mayor just said, thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a tie vote. Do we have any more discussion by council after hearing Tom? Mike?
Yeah, after listening to him, I'm definitely in agreement with him, with the need for more housing here within the city and within the limited geographical areas that we have available. So I wish I would have been able to hear his input before the vote was taken.
Okay, thank you, Cliff.
My first question is a procedural question, as far as how do we go back and revisit this and reopen it for discussion? Need to reintroduce the motion, and is that, can you reintroduce a motion without amendment?
Go ahead,
Hey,
Rob.
Cliff. Selah Municipal Code, the best answer comes from Selah Municipal Code 1.06.360 entitled, 1.06.350 entitled Motions to Reconsider. It says motions to reconsider must be made by a member who voted with the majority and at the same or the next succeeding meeting of the council. That's the way it reads. It has not been changed since 1989, according to what's online. Now, we did not have a majority. We had a tie. And I think the intent probably is that probably anybody could bring a motion to reconsider in this scenario if the intent of this section is that those who lost at the prior motion, or those that voted with the majority at the prior motion, are able to bring a motion to reconsider. In one scenario, that would be those that lost. So in a typical scenario, if we have all 7 attendees and 4 vote no, any of those 4 could bring the motion to reconsider. Or in a typical scenario, if we have all 7 attendees and 4 vote yes, theoretically, any of those 4 could bring a motion to reconsider to change it to a no. Given that we don't have a majority, I think it would be in good order for any council member to advance a motion to reconsider, but I cannot guarantee you that.
Cliff?
Okay, I move that we reconsider the previous motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve, or do we need to go back and simply make a motion to approve?
I think you need a new motion.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Cliff's motion would be to reconsider the outcome of the immediately preceding motion.
Mhm. Okay.
Question is whether there will be a second as to Cliff's motion.
Okay. So we have a motion by Cliff to reconsider the last motion on this. Do we have a second? Roger?
A second.
Okay. All those in favor?
I have
Madam
to do
Mayor,
roll call, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, before we hold the roll call, I'd like to interject here and ask if any council member has an objection to the reconsideration motion going forward, being considered. If you do, please raise your hand so I can see it. I'm seeing no raised hands. So there could be a discussion now, Madam Mayor, as to the pending motion for reconsideration. And if there is no discussion, there could be a roll call held.
Okay. So do we have any discussion on this? Cliff?
So without changing the zoning to R3, when we looked at the zoning map, a good portion of it was already R2, but there were some distinct blue spots there that I recognized that neighborhood as being planned developments. And so with the can you explain a little bit about what the difference, advantages, disadvantages, procedure, whatever it is, the difference between zoning at R3 and what the basic requirements for that would differ from having to go through a planned development?
So basically you cannot do a planned development in this community that would mimic an R3. Sorry, I might. Tom, I'm gonna have to. I keep getting feedback here. See if I can turn the volume down. Sorry, Cliff. There we go. All right.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
We have a motion to reconsider, and this conversation should be associated with a call for another motion to vote on it again.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, so we have a motion to reconsider by Cliff. Do we have a second?
Councilmember Bell seconded.
Okay, by Roger. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Mattson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you. Okay. So we're going back now and asking for a motion to approve this ordinance. Do we have that, Roger?
Yes, I move to approve the change of R2 to R3.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion to approve by Roger, a second by Jackie. Is there any discussion?
I guess I should answer Councilman Peters' question. So with regard to the plan development zoning, the previous city administrator went and changed our plan development ordinance such that that new ordinance has such strict and high requirements that you would not be able to go and to conduct a plan development on those smaller piece of property similar to this size of a piece of property and meet all the requirements. The past city plan development, which allowed those R3 developments and R2 developments to occur in and around this neighborhood, did not have as strict rules and regulations, and as such was allowed the developer to basically create his plan development the way he would like it, and then it went through a hearing process to, so to speak, prove it to the neighborhood and to the city council prior to it being constructed. So in this instance, that you would not be able to do that. The R3 zone is the only way to advance the density.
Thank
Did
you,
that
Jeff.
answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And also, while I'm here addressing parking, I believe that the property owner would have more problem with people going to the park and parking in their area rather than residents parking in the park area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Realistically, Jeff, how many units could a person put in a lot like that, given all the other guidelines that they'd have to follow?
I mean, it's hard to say because it really comes down to the type of development that they're willing to go to. Like Tom said, was explained to you, and maybe I'll ask, I still have him on the phone here, so maybe I'll ask him here if he had a number that they came up with. But most developers would not be able to get, close to those 13 units that per acre out of that property, just because our development standards would limit it down to, maybe 7 or 8. But it depends upon, how much money a developer is willing to put into a piece of property to develop it. If you decide to go vertical, as when we were looking at police station options and city hall options previously, when you go up, the price goes up, and most developers don't want to go and invest those higher dollars when the amount of rent that they're going to get out of the property is not that much. But let me ask Tom. Tom, are you still there listening?
Yes.
I'm going to turn up your volume here again. The council members were asking if you had calculated the amount of dwelling units that you believe that an average developer could maybe get out of this with R3 zoning.
I've not made any kind of calculations. I approached this application as a non-project application. There may be others on staff here that have looked at it, but I haven't.
Did you all hear that?
Cliff?
Is this is this parcel similar to those that are up on Riverview that have like 6 or 8 max? Is that the same size parcel that we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, you're even as you drive around the block, you know, and around Riverview and everything, that is generally what the number of dwelling units and those other units are about equal.
Kevin?
Just my opposition to this is just the simple fact that when people move into a area, sometimes they consider how that area is zoned and the type of environment they're wanting to live in. I don't like the idea of changing especially to high density in the middle of an area that's already vastly in the majority R2. So that's the reason for my opposition.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yeah, I share the same thoughts. I agree with the premises that were outlined of the need for more higher density, and I particularly like this location's proximity to the park and public transit, and I think it has a lot going on for it. But the issue of it being predominantly right among what is currently used as single family homes and large lots, I think that there's better lots to consider changing to the higher density than this one.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I would make one statement with regard to the comprehensive plan amendments and the rezone applications. If you look at the different criteria, I believe if I remember right, there's about 7 on each of them. And really these applications are about, they're a balancing act. No one criteria is stronger than the other. They only need to have one to be considered. What you have to do, and this is what the Planning Commission based their recommendation on, is to look at the public need and those 7 criteria, and then determine based upon the need for the property, particularly the public opposition or favor towards the application, and then weigh those criteria. And if there was one criteria that was stronger than the others, then you would go and lean on that particular point to go over there and outweigh the others. But in this case, because of the fact that there was virtually, there was one public comment in opposition, and this went out to 600-foot radius, which expands to quite a larger area, way larger than the single block area that we canvassed the area for and looked at existing multifamily dwellings in R2 properties and R3 properties. They said that the public need for this type of property and this rezone outweighs the one public comment in opposition to this particular rezone request. And because of that fact, that's why they're recommending approval of this. Is those other 6 criteria are met and outweigh the public need, the public opposition in regard to this application.
Thank you, Jeff. Roger?
There are several apartment complexes in this general area already. one immediately adjacent is the Viking Apartments. It's right across from the pool on Third. So it's not a unique change to that. But my real question is, how do we go back to the Planning Commission now and say, why did we reject what they approved for this, and tell them what they need to do with that? So that's it.
I don't think at this juncture, you wouldn't be doing that. When you as a council, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but when you as a council go and deny the application, you were saying that you have reviewed the Planning Commission's recommendation and you have reviewed all the facts and findings of this particular application, and you were going to have to state your own findings of fact with regard to how this application did not meet those 7 criteria that they considered.
That is correct.
Okay, any more discussion, council? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the table to approve by Roger, a second by Jackie. Roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
No.
Councilmember Mattson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
No.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
Thank you. Thank you, council. Moving forward to L4, Rocky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council. Staff is recommending holding an open public hearing to consider the adoption of the city's updated water system plan, which is entitled City of Selah Water System Plan, February 2021. As discussed during the October 12th study session, this is a periodic update of a pre-existing city plan. The city owns, operates, and maintains a municipal potable water supply, storage, and distribution system. The city's water system plan is regulated by the Washington State Department of Health via the Washington Administrative Code. The WAC requires the city to update its water system plan and to obtain Washington State Department of Health approval of the updated water system plan prior to the expiration of the city's pre-existing water system plan. The city has completed the necessary updating of its water system plan and has already received the necessary approval from Washington State Department of Health. In addition, the city has also completed other necessary prerequisites to implement the updated water system plan, including publishing advance notice of today's public hearing regarding the potential adoption of the updated water system plan. It is staff's recommendation first to hold an open public hearing regarding the city's updated water system plan, then approve the attached ordinance, which, if approved, will formally adopt the updated water system plan and will formally repeal the preceding water system plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. We will now open the public hearing for any comments from council and public. Council, do you have any questions from staff? Seeing nothing from the council, seeing nothing from the public, we will now close the public hearing and move on. 04, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. It is staff's recommendation to vote to approve the ordinance adopting the water system plan February 2021 and formally repeal the preceding water system plan. Are there any questions?
Cliff?
I move to adopt the water system plan and replace the previous revision.
Okay. Roger, you had your hand up?
Yes, seconded.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Cliff, a second by Roger. Is there any discussion, council? Seeing no discussion, roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Moving on, L5, Mr. Novoselski.
Yes, what we're doing this evening is having an annual public hearing required by law to talk about revenue sources of our upcoming year. And we're going to talk about property taxes and utility rates. In your council packet, you should have a schedule which shows our projected property taxes for 2022. By law, council is allowed to request a 1% increase in the property tax levy plus taxes on new construction. If we desire more than that, then we would have to go to the voters and get their approval. I've received figures from the county assessor that show that with a 1% increase in new construction, our property tax levy for next year would be approximately $2,243,000. Based upon reassessments done by the county assessor, the actual tax levy rate per thousand has decreased from $2.55 to $2.33, which is a 9% decrease. So what that means is if you have a home that has an assessed value of $200,000, if your assessed value is increased for next year by 9%, which would be $18,000, your city property tax would remain the same. If your assessed value changes by less, you're actually going to have a reduction of taxes. And if your assessed value increases by more than 9%, then your city property tax will increase $2.33 for each of those $1,000. Are there any questions regarding property tax? Okay. So as you've heard, we've been having our preliminary budget discussions with department heads for 2022. And we've also received communications from our garbage hauler, Basin Disposal, Inc., where by contract, they're allowed to increase rates 80% of the CPI. So we have received notification that their rates to us are going to go up almost 3% next year. So, and based on direction I've received from Public Works for water and sewer, we're proposing, you will see in the budget, a 3% increase in rates for water, sewer, and garbage. And in your council packet, you should have had the comparison between 2021 rates and this proposed 2022 rates. So for a minimum water usage, which is 300 cubic feet and a 60-gallon garbage service, the rates are going up $2.38. Currently, our utility tax is at 14.5%. It had been at 29.5%, but the utility tax on that $2.38 is 35 cents. So the monthly increase for that level of service would be $2.73. And, as you can see, I provided different scenarios for different types of customers, being residential, commercial, and low income. And I would welcome any questions.
Roger?
Dale, are we anticipating any changes because of the economy as far as those that would apply for low income?
Well, yes, Roger. Here recently, I was advised that the Social Security Administration is going to be providing a cost of living increase of almost 6% at the first of the year. Currently, we only recognize 2/3 of Social Security and 2/3 of pension, and then with a income limit of $15,000. So yes, I'm currently in the process of evaluating, and you will see at the first of the year where I'm going to recommend that we increase that limit higher than the $15,000 that we currently have in place.
Thank you.
Dale, are you ready for me to open the public hearing?
Yes, that's where just one comment for the city administrator. I sent him an email at 6:07 this evening in regards to an upcoming item on the agenda that I believe he wants to read my email. And that's all I have. And yes, you're welcome to go into the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. So we are now open, I'm opening the public hearing on the revenue sources for the 2022 budget. Any comments from council? I'm seeing none and seeing none from the public participants. We'll now close the public hearing. Council, what is your desire?
There is no.
There is none. I'm sorry. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, moving on. General business, under new business, we have none. Old business, we have none. Resolutions, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council. Tonight, for your consideration is resolution authorizing the mayor to sign task order number 2021-11 between the city and HLE Engineering and Land Surveying, Inc. for professional engineering services related to the 2021 annual update to the city stormwater management plan. This is a periodic update of a pre-existing city plan. In 2011, the city implemented a stormwater management plan. In 2014, the city entered into a written agreement with other local municipalities, the Regional Stormwater Working Group. This was done in order to comply with the Eastern Washington Phase 2 Municipal Stormwater Permit issued by the Washington State Department of Ecology. In 2020, the agreement for the RSWG was renegotiated. As a result of that renegotiation, the city is now required to update its stormwater management plan on an annual basis. Among other things, professional engineering services will be required for the city's 2021 annual update to be properly conceived and implemented. HLA Engineering and Land Surveying, Inc. provides professional engineering services to the city on a project-by-project basis because the city does not directly employ any engineers on its staff. HLA is willing and able to provide assistance to the city on this updating project. The estimated maximum cost for HLA services is $9,000. The plan is due by December 31st, 2021. And the recommendation is to authorize the mayor to sign task order number 2021-11 with HLA for this project at the estimated maximum cost. So the project can commence on this. Are there any questions?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the resolution in the form presented.
Thank you, Jackie.
Mike second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve by Jackie, a second by Mike. Is there any discussion, council? Seeing none, roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you. N2, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is for consideration a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign contract number PC 22-96103-046 between the city and the Washington State Public Works Board in order for the city to obtain financing for the city's contemplated water service meter improvements project. This is a loan whereby the city will borrow funds for the water service meter improvements project. The city's adopted 2021 budget contemplated that the city would directly pay for, without utilizing any borrowed funds, the city's contemplated water service meter improvements project. The Public Works Department secured a loan commitment that can be utilized for the project. The loan would be provided by the Washington State Public Works Board. City staff believes the proposed loan terms offer a good financial option for the city rather than the city paying directly for such project. The principal sum borrowed would be $1,600,000. The interest rate would be 0.75%, and the repayment terms would be over 20 years. The attached resolution will, if approved, authorize the mayor to sign the contract with the Washington State Public Works Board. Are there any questions?
Cliff?
Clarification of terms on page 3 of the contract. There's a line that says loan reimbursement start date of August 6, 2021, and want to know what that is and how that affects what it affects, because the provided timeline, the original application was made in the end of May, and then apparently then at the end of September that there was the request, and now here we are at the end of October. We don't have any money and we've already started a reimbursement clock. I don't know where August 6th comes from and what does that really mean?
So the August 6th date is the date that the Public Works Board awarded the city the funds. And for the Public Works Board, their award date is when the project starts.
So it doesn't mean that we've already started accumulating interest or anything? Because it's labeled reimbursement start date.
Right, no, no funds have,
Finish it.
I'm sorry, Cliff. There's no funds that have been received or drawn on this loan at this point because we don't have a signed contract with them. So there is no interest accruing at this point. Interest will accrue as funds are taken for this project, excuse me. And so over the next 3 years is the project length. We won't be pulling the total 1.6. We're going to break it down and phase it over 3 years is the thought that we have for Public Works at this time.
Okay, thank you. It's terminology. To me, reimbursement means payback.
Right.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Cliff.
A second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Jackie. We have a motion to approve by Cliff, a second by Jackie. Is there any discussion, council? Kevin?
Do we have an estimate of what we expect to save with the new meter system? Is that a FTE?
No, it wouldn't be staff. We would direct staff to do preventative maintenance or maintenance and operations in lieu of going out and hand reading these meters. And then also it would free up city hall staff to perform other duties that are required.
Jackie?
Thank you. Does this also have a capability of the residents being able to look on a website to track their own water usage and see if there's any issues there? Kind of like the Ion Water in Yakima?
Depending on which water meter manufacturer we go with, there is that option. My understanding is for a customer portal, that would be an additional cost to the city. And that would be something that council would have to make a determination on if they wanted to add that additional cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kevin?
I'm assuming, will part of this loan be used for the engineering that we're also looking at with HLA? Will this be used to pay part of that?
Yeah, you're speaking of the task order that was approved by council last council meeting?
Yes.
Yes, this will pay those debts to HLA for this project.
Okay, council, any more discussion? Okay, we have a motion to approve by Cliff, a second by Jackie. Roll call, Teresa?
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Mattson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Resolution N3, Mr. Wallace.
Madam Mayor, N3 has been removed.
Oh, sorry. N4.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For your consideration is a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign a agreement dated October 21, 2021 between the city and the law firm Foster Garvey, PC, engaging the law firm to provide bond counsel services related to the city's wastewater collection system improvements project. The city is required pursuant to federal regulations to engage bond counsel to render an informed opinion as to the validity of the bond that will be secured for and applicable to the city's wastewater collection system improvements project. The law firm Foster Garvey, PC, is willing and able to provide such services and has proposed a 3-page letter agreement, a copy of which is submitted with this AIS. The bond will be a taxable revenue bond, and it will be purchased through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. USD regulations further require the city to secure interim financing, typically a line of credit with a local bank, to cover costs during the construction period, pending the issuance of the bond. The city intends to provide interim financing by issuing the associated note to a bank. Now, this is for the USDA RD wastewater system improvements project. Are there any questions?
Looks like there's no questions, Rocky. Council, what is your desire?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the resolution in the form presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Roger. Is there any discussion, council? Seeing no discussion, roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Mattson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Under ordinances, 09, Mr. Case.
Madam Mayor, you have an ordinance in 5.
In 5, oh, Mr. Chrisman. Okay, Chief Chrisman.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
we're still on, I'm sorry, we're still on the resolution N5. You skipped one there.
Hang on a second. Oh, yes, I did. Mr. Case.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, you have in front of you action item N5, Nancy 5. You can see that it's a longer AIS than is customary. You can also see on the AIS that this proposal is actually being advanced by the city administrator, Joe Hinney, but I'm going to offer some clarifying remarks. I've written the AIS, I know the circumstances, and I'm hoping to get us through this quickly. So this pertains to what is in reality a de facto reorganization that's been going on here at City Hall. Of course, we have a new city administrator following the departure of the previous city administrator in late May of this year. Also, we previously had a human resources director, that was Andrew Potter, who departed his city employment in late 2020. The net result, well, and then we have a third departure actually that's relevant. That would be the recent departure by our former executive assistant, or also known as an administrative assistant, Monica Lake. The net effect of those 3 changes has caused a reshuffling of some duties and assignments, and thus, as I said, a de facto reorganization. Prior to his departure, the previous city administrator was doing both the city administrator role and the human resources role. Subsequent to his departure, the human resources role was assigned by the mayor to an existing employee, Teresa Morales, who at that time was only occupying the position of the public records officer position. So she was at that time essentially doing 2 roles, the public records officer role and the human resources manager role. That's basically been the situation since probably May 26th of 2020. But if not, certainly by June 1st of 2021. I said 2020 earlier, I meant 2021. Then following the departure of Miss Lake that I mentioned before, we had a gap as well as to the assistant role, be it called administrative assistant or executive assistant. The mayor at that point also assigned that position to Miss Morales to cover. In fact, Miss Lake started training Miss Morales a couple of weeks before Miss Lake's departure, because her departure was prearranged. She announced her intention to resign and take employment elsewhere. So for the last handful of months, Miss Morales has been doing effectively three roles. She's been doing the public records officer role, the human resources manager role, and the executive assistant role. That has worked relatively well. And it is a position of city management, specifically Mr. Hinney, that he would like to continue this arrangement indefinitely. The assessment has been made that previously City Hall may have been slightly overstaffed in headcount. And we believe that also the public records officer role may prove to be less time consuming in future years, given that we have seen a marked decrease in the number of public records requests that have been submitted since the change in city administrator occurred in late May of this year. The second reason we believe the public records officer role here at City Hall may require less time going forward is the bulk of public records requests that the city has been receiving since the departure of the previous city administrator have pertained to police reports and other pretty standard police documents. And the way that the city has been operating in regards to those, Ms. Morales is still the public records officer, so she still has the original intake obligations and still make sure that those requests are processed timely and responded to appropriately. But when the requests themselves have pertained to police reports or other standard documents from the police department, one of the administrative assistants who works at the police office has been able to provide quite a good amount of assistance to Ms. Morales, basically redacting the police reports and getting the data to Ms. Morales, that Ms. Morales can then turn around and just put the final bow on it. So what's before you today is not, for clarity, is not a request for the council to approve these assignments. By law, it's up to the mayor to choose who basically does what job. There are some exceptions to that. I'm an exception because the code says that the city attorney appointment has to be appointed by the mayor and then approved by the council. Mr. Hinney, his role is the same. City administrator position is appointed by the mayor and then approved by the council. But for the three roles or positions in discussion right now, that is not the scenario. The three roles in discussion right now, as I said, are the public records officer position, the human resources manager position, and the administrative assistant position. Each of those are subject to appointment or assignment of those duties at the mayor's discretion, and the council does not need to approve and has no power to disapprove that delegation of tasks. So instead, what this AIS and its associated resolution presents to you is the money side of things. Currently, Ms. Morales is earning a monthly gross salary of $5,125. That was her salary at the start of 2021 when she was just doing a singular role. The point being, she's been doing three roles now for a handful of months, and the plan is to have her continue to do those three roles. And city administration has agreed that thus she should be entitled to a corresponding raise to compensate for her doing more than she was previously doing at a set price. So the proposal in front of you is to increase her gross monthly salary from the original rate of $5,125 to a new rate that's $1,000 more per month, $6,125. That's the big thing that it would do. And then there's some related things that also this resolution, if it gets approved, would do. One of those related things that it would do is it would make her new salary retroactive to a previous date. I think we ended up choosing the date of, is it August 1st? Yes, August 1st. That's similar to the process that occurred a handful of months ago when Mr. Hinney became city administrator. A resolution was presented to the city council at that time to make his appointment retroactive to a previous date. and the council approved it. Just because you approved it there doesn't mean you need to approve it here, but I'm pointing out there's a consistency of process that I'm trying to employ. So that's one of the other related things that would happen if this resolution gets approved. Another related thing that would happen if this resolution gets approved, again, somewhat similar to what occurred with Mr. Hinney, pertains to Ms. Morales's vacation leave accrual. Her current years of service to the city are such that she would be in the category of accruing typically 2 weeks per calendar year of vacation leave. But the agreement, again, preliminary agreement that's been struck between the administrator and Ms. Morales is instead that she should be accruing 3 weeks going forward of vacation leave. So the real comparison here is not really the current de facto reality to how things used to be, again, in terms of job assignments, but rather in terms of money, leave, and benefits. We used to have 3 individuals performing these 3 roles. So thus we had a salary payable to each of those individuals, vacation leave accrued by each of those individuals, and then other fringe benefits such as health insurance that the city was obligated to purchase for each of those 3 individuals. I've given you the comparative salaries that Ms. Lake and Mr. Potter were earning at the dates of their respective separations, and those were $4,676 gross per month for Mr. Potter, $4,519 gross for Ms. Lake. So basically about $4,500 for one, about $4,500 for the other, and then for the third, that would be Ms. Morales in her original position of public records officer, about $5,000, $5,100. So if you do real rough arithmetic, you're looking at about $15,000 for the 3-person head count way that this used to work. Whereas by contrast, if this proposed resolution is approved, although Ms. Morales's salary will again increase by $1,000 a month with a post date or a retroactive date to August 1st. So you're looking at August, September, October, November, December, 1,000 times each of those. Of course, in comparison to roughly 15,000 for 3 people, the city still comes out far ahead on salary paid. And then when you get into the concept of benefits, the quote unquote savings is even more substantial because there's just 1 batch of benefits provided along with family members rather than 3 batches and potential family members. So what Mr. Hinney is presenting to you today, although I'm being his communicator here for him, is for the council to consider the proposed resolution approving this new salary for Ms. Morales, the retroactive date of it, and the new vacation accrual. We need to do this if this is what's going to happen and she's going to get this money because, of course, the council has power to set salaries for positions here at the city. And this is the best approach I could think of for the scenario we're in. We will probably also be coming back to the council. If this resolution gets approved, we'll probably come back to you in short order, maybe at the very next hearing, with an amendment to the salary ordinance. There are some other issues with the salary ordinance that I'll actually address a little bit more when I get to my next presentation to you about a different ordinance that I want to amend part of our city code. I know that's a little bit cryptic, but I'll get there. I'll clarify that for you when we get there. So in general, like I said, what's being presented to you today is a proposed resolution to increase Ms. Morales' salary in exchange for her continuing to do these 3 roles, making that retroactive to a date and increasing her vacation accrual. And none of us have a crystal ball, but I would anticipate that if somehow this resolution is not approved, that Ms. Morales would probably exercise her prerogative to go back to just performing her original singular role of public records officer. And thus the city may have to go out, recruit and hire 1 or 2 more people to fill these other 2 roles. So that's my initial presentation. If there are a motion and a second, I will then field any questions that might arise during discussion. I see your hand, Joe.
I missed this earlier when I read through these ordinances, but on page 2 of the attached ordinance in the second paragraph, it actually says 3 weeks per calendar month. That needs to be changed to year. Other than that, I didn't see any very omissions.
Yeah, so that's the first word in the second line on number 2 in the proposed resolution. And the typo of the word there on the page is not, the word should be here. That's correct.
I move to approve the resolution as presented.
Thank you, Jackie.
Mike, second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Jackie, a second by Mike. Is there any discussion, council? Suzanne?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Rob, you touched on it a little bit, but when I was considering this, I was looking ahead to the restructure because I realized this is a small part of a bigger picture. And I was specifically looking at the part C of that or of the last one that says the city may, at the discretion of the mayor, combine multiple positions for any period of time, provided, however, in each circumstance, the salary payable to any employee for performing combined positions shall not exceed the maximum amount specified on the then applicable salary ordinance for the highest paid of the combined positions, unless the city council approves the higher salary for such employee. So I'm curious what we're being asked to do. Is this pay rate, does it fit into one of the salary ordinances, or what we're being asked to do is to approve a higher one since she's taking on all three?
So a couple of clarifications there. What you were reading from there is actually not the action item that's immediately in front of you right now. You were reading there. You were reading there from part of what will be action item O-9. That's the first clarification. The second clarification is something I just said during my initial presentation, and that is if the action item that's at consideration right now, the proposed resolution for Ms. Morales' new salary, gets approved, I will then come back to the city council with a corresponding amendment to the salary ordinance that will add her in some way to that salary ordinance. I say in some way because we may still designate different salaries for the 3 positions because there's a possibility there might be a division of the labor in the future. Now, thirdly, and I think this is really going to address what you were raising, Councilmember Vargas, the phraseology that you were reading again from action item O-9 that talks about if the mayor hires someone in a position that's not on the salary ordinance, the maximum the mayor could pay that person is no more than the lowest salary in the department where that person would work. So let's say the mayor hires somebody new at City Hall that's not been in a position that's been previously acknowledged to exist at the city. The mayor could not hire that person at like my equivalent salary or Mr. Hinney's equivalent salary, but rather it would have to be the lowest salary for the person that works here in the building. Okay. Now that's all proposed language as to O-9. None of that exists yet, but that would be the way that would work if the resolution that's immediately in front of you gets approved, and when we get to O-9, if that ordinance gets approved too. Did that answer your question?
Somewhat. I guess I'm still just wondering if, I guess to be more direct with my question, is the rate, does it fit within one of the current ordinances? Or is this a higher than what the current ordinances outline?
Well, you've asked the question, so I'll answer it. The rate does not fit within the existing ordinances. There are multiple problems with our employment ordinances and code sections that refer to employment here at the city. The bulk of those problems are that those sections have not been periodically updated when the de facto reality at the city has changed. Speaking to what you've been raising about O-9, action item O-9, that pertains to Selah Municipal Code section 1.10.031. That's a code section that says, I'm paraphrasing, but it says, here's a list of all the full-time non-union positions that exist at the city of Selah. Okay, that's what it says. Many current positions we have filled are not on that list. Some positions we have filled use different names that are on that list. there's a lot of incongruence that exists. So Miss Morales' current position, her original position, let's call it. Now her real original position was Parks Department, her original City Hall position, Public Records Officer, is not listed in our city code as being an actual position. So that right there answers your question that there cannot possibly be that it fits within our existing code. I'm trying to play catch up here and fix things that I've discovered since I came on board. There's even an argument to be made as to Miss Lake. Now, maybe there it's just a semantical argument, but Miss Lake was customarily referred to as an executive assistant. Our Selah Municipal Code recites no such position. Now it cites administrative assistant. And I could go on. I could talk about the human resources manager or director. There's just a lot that needs to be fixed. So when you pose the question as you did, basically, if I'm paraphrasing it back to you correctly, hey, is the salary that Teresa is going to get, is that something that's kind of already established? No, that's why we're coming to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jackie?
I see your.
Thank you. When I moved to approve as presented, I did not note the correction that Mr. Henney brought up regarding that the 3 weeks per calendar month rather than calendar year. So I believe I need to correct my motion to approve amended. How do I go about doing that?
We've had a motion
So,
to approve and
what I would suggest is to use a phrase that I was using quite a bit at a prior council meeting, that one of the council members advances a sub motion pursuant to Selah Municipal Code section 1.06.034 that empowers the council members to advance a motion to amend the original motion. So if a council member would advance a sub motion to amend, with the specific being that the word month will be changed to the word year in numbered paragraph 2 of the proposed resolution. And then if we get a second on that sub motion, that should effectuate the necessary correction.
Thank you, Rob. Roger?
So move for the sub motion.
Cliff?
I'll second.
So we have a motion. Wait, Rob, if I'm doing this right, we have a motion by Roger to approve with the change of monthly to yearly. And we have a second by Cliff. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that right, Rob?
I think that'll suffice. Is there any discussion as to the now pending sub motion?
Yeah.
Any discussion at all? Seeing no hands, Teresa, can you do a roll call as to the now pending sub motion?
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Mattson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay. The matter that is now pending is the original motion as modified. So the word month has been now changed to year in paragraph 2 of the proposed ordinance on page 2. So is there any further discussion or any further sub motions prior to a vote on the now pending original motion as amended?
Seeing no discussion. Roll call, Monica?
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for your clarification there.
You're welcome. I believe you're at 05 on the agenda now, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. So under ordinance 05, Chief Chrisman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you. I was having some technical difficulties earlier. Before a request to consider hiring a probationary officer, and if you have seen the AIS, you'll note that through the month of June this year, we openly and aggressively recruited for an entry-level police officer list. Eligible candidates participated in a series of testing, and an ordered list of applicants was established. Then on July 22nd, the list was certified by the Selah Civil Service Board commissioners. Under the findings, you'll note that one of my police sergeants notified me recently of his planned retirement. The sergeant's last day of work will be February 28th of 2022, creating a vacancy on March 1st, 2022. The Selah Police Department holds a current and certified sergeant's promotional list, and it's my intention to replace the retiring sergeant with an officer from that list. This movement will leave a vacancy in the police officer rank. To hire a replacement officer sooner rather than later would benefit the department and city and the community we serve. We can begin the training or complete a substantial amount of training so that we avoid a gap in service, mitigate overtime and staffing stress, and have an officer available sooner to provide service to the community as a whole. It takes about a year for a police officer to navigate the hiring and training process. Just being accepted to and graduating from the police academy today is a real struggle. This is followed by 3 months of field training to ensure recruits will be successful and productive member of the Selah Police Department. On September 27th, I was notified by the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, our police academy, that a seat had been reserved in the Basic Law Enforcement Academy class, BLEA number 830, in anticipation of this pre-hire. The academy class begins on November 16th, and it's 720 hours in length, or about 18 weeks of training, of intense in-person training at the Police Academy in Burien, Washington. And it concludes on March 30th of next year, just 1 month after my sergeant's retirement. When a student officer graduates, they come back to the academy, they do the field training before they can ever promote to a solo status on the street. Because of the high demand for suitable police officer candidates, the longer we wait to hire from the certified list, the more likely it is that the best, highest rated, and most enticing candidates have already been taken by other agencies, effectively exhausting our eligibility list. At the very top of our list right now, we have available to us a highly qualified entry-level candidate who lives in Selah and wants to work at the Selah Police Department. He has tested nowhere else but here. He's passed all of our background examinations and is prepared to attend the Basic Law Enforcement Academy next month. I would tell you that I initially had this money set aside in my salary savings, but as you recall from a previous council meeting, that money was moved. So tonight I'm asking the council to approve an ordinance amending the 2021 budget for the hiring of one probationary police officer as I've described.
Mike? You're muted, Mike.
I move to approve the amended 2021 budget for the hiring of a probationary officer for the police department.
Thank you, Mike.
Kevin, I'll second.
Thank you, Kevin. So it's been moved by Mike, seconded by Kevin. Is there any discussion, council? Seeing no discussion, roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Case, 09.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, what's before you now is action item 09. It should be the last action item of the night. This was briefly touched on earlier by myself and Councilmember Vargas during our discussion. As I said at that time, this proposed ordinance is to amend part of our Selah Municipal Code. That's our city law, specifically Selah Municipal Code section 1.10.031. In the proposed ordinance, I fully quote the current text of that section. You can see it there. It just has a title or a heading on it, and then just list some positions or some titles. Then within the body of the proposed ordinance, I give you what the new language would be. You can see that there's a few changes there. One, I'm giving a new title. But more substantively, two, you'll see new subsections A through E that give some new, what would be new rules and some new clarifications. Some of that's to comport with the way things already work or have been happening. Some of it's to provide some clarity and roadmap for the future. And then as to the list of positions, that is the new subpart, proposed subpart F. And you can see that the list is different in a couple of regards. One, a lot of the positions have different names. Some positions have been removed, some positions are added. Two, the positions are categorized or grouped by department or by kind of the equivalent of a department. One of them, I think, on there is City Hall. That's not technically a department. And I was trying to come up with the best examples of phrases and labels that the city has historically been using to just group these positions in a logical way. A third large change is you'll notice on the new proposed list that some of those positions have asterisks that precede them. As the body of the document that I'm proposing says, those asterisks are to recite that those specific positions, we may have multiple holders in those roles. So for example, like firefighter 1, the status 1, we're not just going to likely have one firefighter that fits that status at any given time. We'll probably have a handful of them. But more specifically, when you get to like the administrative assistants and some of the clerks, again, the asterisk is to suggest or actually to make known that we may have multiple employees at certain points of time basically occupying the same sort of position or role. They would be separate employees, but they would be at the same sort of status. And that's one other clarification I want to offer before I get into all the reasons or some of the reasons why this is necessary. And that other clarification is this new proposed language for 1.01.031 clarifies that the list is not a head count. Rather, the list is a brief summary label or description for the types of positions, types of offices, depending upon one's chosen phraseology, the types of positions that exist and are contemplated to potentially exist in the near future. So for example, just because there is a position recited on the list does not mean that the city is obligated to always have someone in that position. And just because, as I talked about with the asterisk earlier, for example, back to firefighter 1, that's on there with an asterisk. So again, that does not mean that we will just have one firefighter at the first level status, but we might have multiples. Okay. So there's some clarifications, and now I'll get into why this is necessary, or some of the reasons why it's necessary. And that's, and again, in an AIS that's quite a bit longer than normal. So I think I identify 4 different broad reasons within this AIS as to why these changes are necessary. This code section, as I said earlier, pertains to full-time non-union positions. So it's not about part-time people. It's not about union people like the bulk of our police department and some of our public works people, but full-time non-union positions and people. So the first reason we need to make these changes is one of the positions that's on the currently existing list should not be there. And that position is the Public Works Utility Foreman. That's recited on here as on the existing list as supposedly being a non-union position, but in reality, it's a union position. That's one reason we need to make these changes. Second reason is, and I've touched on this earlier, there's a number of positions that are currently occupied or historically have been occupied that are actually not recited on the current list as even existing. One of those is the human resources position, I believe. The other one's the public records officer position. You can even get into my own position and the city administrator position are not on this list, the pre-existing list, for whatever reason. So the pre-existing list was just wrong compared to how the city has been operating. Before I get into the third and fourth points, I'll note that this particular code section has not been amended, I think, since 2009, if I have that right. It's either 2009 or 2011. I pulled up the ordinance whereby it was amended back at that time. And then we had a different city administrator, different mayor, different city attorney. I mean, almost all these positions, the management positions were different. So it was none of us folks at that time. But that ordinance within it basically says a similar thing that I'm saying to you today. It says, oh, geez, we're out of compliance with what's written down. That's just not how we've been doing it. We're trying to play catch up and write down finally the way we've been doing it. So it's unfortunate that another 12 years or so have passed, and I've now caught this now that I've come on board and trying to get us back writing down what we actually do. But I'll tell you, the status we're in now sounds like similar to what we were in back in 2009. I'll now move on to the third and fourth reasons. The third reason is, and I touched on this earlier, some of the labels or descriptions within the current list use labels or terms of art different from what the city has actually historically been using. Miss Lake's former role is a good one. There's nothing on the current list that's referred to as an executive assistant. As I said earlier, there's administrative assistant. That's the very top of the current list. I guess somebody could argue those are the same role, but I'd like to use the words that the city actually uses and to get those in our code to try and promote some clarity. And then the fourth reason is that there's a kind of a broader problem or restriction, as I see it, with the current list and the current way that this code section currently reads. And that is the current code section, as I said, it doesn't really have any narrative statements in it, any substantive statements. It has a title or a heading, and then it has just a list. Combination of that is it could be construed to be a restrictive and exhaustive list, meaning, hey, these are the only roles the city potentially can have. I don't think that's necessary. I don't see any provision of state law that makes that necessary. And I think it is unduly inflexible and can only potentially lead to quandaries such as the quandary that I'm trying to fix right now tonight. So our current way it reads suggests that we have the designated positions and only those positions. If that were to actually be construed that way, it could unduly restrict management's authority. That's the mayor and the city administrator on behalf of the mayor as the chief day-to-day officer, the power to hire other workers for the city, full-time non-union workers. I don't believe that sort of restriction should exist. Rather, the restrictions that should exist in my perspective would be, of course, one, the city cannot overspend compared to the then approved budget. So let's just say there's a certain amount X for all wages. We cannot spend beyond that by hiring somebody new. But then two, and this was brought up earlier between myself and Councilmember Vargas, I've built in a new proposed rule here for another restriction to not just say, hey, the mayor and city administrator can hire whomever they want and pay them whatever they want, but rather to say, in effect, if a new position is created and is filled, a new non-union full-time position that is just the prerogative of the mayor and administrator, not by contrast one that actually requires council's confirmation approval, such as the city attorney or city administrator, but just a new position, full-time non-union, that the mayor and city administrator can do that, but the maximum that person or those people, if there's going to be multiple of these, can be paid is no more than the lowest person on the totem pole, so to speak, in the department. So again, back to City Hall. If all this gets approved and this becomes our new code, let's say the very next day, Mr. Hinney decides he wants to hire, a new person in a brand new position with some new title. That person could only be paid no more than the lowest current salary payable to any current City Hall employee, at least unless and until we come back before council and perhaps get approval for a higher salary for that position. So try and be a little bit more clear on this fourth point. The way it's currently written suggests these are our only roles and there can never be any additional roles. I think that's too restrictive. And instead, I think the way that any restriction should exist should be that the city can employ additional people in new roles, but it cannot overspend compared to the approved budget. And anybody in a brand new role, the maximum salary that person's going to get in a brand new role is going to be the lowest level salary that's been previously approved for that department, unless and until the council might approve a newer, higher salary for that newer position. Now, last thing I'll say is Ms. Morales and I have worked on this quite a bit, and it's been a morass. Different departments have used different labels. Different things have happened. We've had turnover here at the significant positions. I'm trying to get us on the straight and narrow for what has happened, what's going to be happening in the future, and just to write it up the way that it's actually going to work and be followed, rather than, again, like 12 years hence from now, whoever might be in my role or Joe's role or whoever comes to the council at that time and again says, whoops, we've got all these people employed in roles that don't exist, or using titles that don't exist, or, can we have multiple people in a certain sort of category? So I'm trying to create a roadmap that will serve the city well in the future, while also acknowledging the way things have actually been happening. I will field any questions. I contemplate there might be some if and when we have a motion in a second, but that's the best job I can do on explaining the quandary that we're in that I'm trying to fix, without going so far as to say other things that might be detrimental to the city's interests as a whole.
Roger?
I move to approve the ordinance as presented.
Cliff?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to approve by Kevin, a second by Roger. Is there any discussion? Rocky, you have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One clarification, and I apologize for not catching this earlier, is there is under Public Works Administration and Utilities, there's a utility lead / foreman position that is identified. That is actually a represented position. And I apologize to council and you, Madam Mayor, for not catching this previously to this. So I think we need to remove that from the resolution.
Is that your only clarification, Mr. Wallace?
That is my only clarification.
So then, council, I would suggest, as we followed before, if somebody could advance a sub motion to make that amendment, and we can get a second on that.
Okay.
I move to make a sub motion to remove the utility lead foreman from the ordinance.
I second.
And for clarification for everybody, we're looking at page 3 of the proposed ordinance. It's about in the middle of the page. So the words would be fully redacted utility lead / foreman and then the other punctuation editing marks would be made accordingly. Is there any discussion as to the now pending sub motion to amend? I see none. Monica, can you, or excuse me, Teresa, can you do a roll call, please? Now pending sub motion to amend.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Chief Lang's hand. I'm wondering if that's perhaps a similar sort of clarification.
Yes, Rob, there will be, but I don't know that it needs to be done now. It's possible future position. We don't have a battalion chief on there. I spoke with Teresa earlier about this, and I didn't know if we were going to readjust this later, if we need to do it now.
My perspective on that, unless there's other changes to the language I'm presenting, is that is not necessary at this point.
Okay.
Given that, as I said, this will be a non-exclusive list that the mayor could hire somebody in a new position. Now, the rub would be, of course, a battalion chief is one of the higher ranking officers at the fire department. But in reality, if the mayor does hire somebody in that position when it's not yet on the list, that person would come in at an initial rate of pay equivalent to probably the firefighter probationary. Well, actually, it would be the firefighter department administrative assistant. It's probably your lowest paid employee.
Okay, so that was my question on my second question to you. If you could clarify for me, please, if I were to hire a position, and let's use that battalion chief, for instance, that would come between a captain and the deputy chief. We would not hire anybody at the lowest paid position of this department. There's just nobody in this country that'll take that position. So your proposal tonight says we cannot hire anybody above that lowest paid position, to clarify?
In any new role. So
New role, okay?
if you'd like the council members to advance a sub motion to perhaps try and get battalion chief added on to the list between deputy fire chief and captain, they may be inclined to do so.
I don't see a need at this time. I just wanted the clarification. Thank you.
Sure. I see your hand, Councilmember Peterson.
Well, in addressing Chief Lang, if they were going to add that, wouldn't they get it approved before they went out and hired somebody? I mean, because they would be talking about significant. I have a similar question for Chief Chrisman. That in the police department, they have police chief and deputy chief, and our officers, such as captains and lieutenants, are they represented, or are they unrepresented, non-represented?
Representative.
You want to take that, Rob? Or?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Chief.
Oh, I was just saying, do you want to take that? I know that discussion's taken place.
Yeah, my understanding is, and again, Teresa and I have done our best to receive data from every department. As you've seen tonight with the sub motion, we're still amassing this info and trying to get everybody on the same page. But my understanding is the only positions we have historically have had or contemplate having at the police department that would be non-union positions are the two that are on this list, the chief and the deputy chief. So my understanding would be lieutenants and captains, and so to speak, would all still be union positions. Did I say that correct, Chief?
I believe so, yes.
Any other questions or discussion?
I have a question. Back to Chief Lang's question. He said something about, I mean, you said something about adding it now, or or later? And adding it now, would the position would be there, adding it later, they would have to start at the lower wage?
Right. It probably actually will prove to be a distinction without a difference, because there are multiple legal authorities that come into play when we talk about employing somebody and paying them. And it's on that paying part that the rub would occur if the city were to hire a battalion chief with the position of battalion chief not being on the list in this 1.10.031. The net effect, as I said earlier, if that were to happen, is that battalion chief would come in at an inappropriate rate of pay, far too low of a rate of pay, unless and until the council were to improve and hire him out. So that's the way that would work. But here's why I said earlier, it probably proved to be distinct without a difference, at least as to our current legal authorities. Even if this 1.10.031 gets amended in the way I'm proposing. And here's why. As I said, we're talking about employing and paying people. It's on the paying people part where our salary ordinance also has to be respected. And I do not believe we have an entry on our current salary ordinance for battalion chief. This is, again, the morass we're in with inconsistent documents, and then documents also, legal authorities also, that just don't comport with the way the city's been operating. So my perspective is whether battalion chief gets added to my draft that I'm having the council consider as this action item 09, whether that gets added today or not, probably going to prove to be a distinction without a difference, because even if it gets added, the salary ordinance doesn't have an amount for a battalion chief, at least not yet. Now, the council, of course, towards the end of this year is going to be presented a new salary ordinance, as is customary. And when that happens, I'm going to try to get the salary ordinance to line up for all the positions with what this new 1.10.031 might be. But the point being, whether we add battalion chief to what's before the council right now or not, the battalion chief is not going to be able to be paid a real battalion chief salary unless and until the salary ordinance also gets amended.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, council, there's a couple equivalent sort of scenarios that I've identified that I'm going to be coming to you, trying to get things written the way we actually should do it and have been doing it.
Cliff?
Is there something that sort of approximates job descriptions to go along with these titles? The city attorney and city administrator have a separate section in the code that gives a brief description of expectations and things. But when you're talking about like what we just did, and combine a human resource officer and a public records officer and an administrative assistant, did they ever have anything that approximated a job description in the first place that we can say now they're doing 3 jobs instead of 1?
Okay, so you, within that discussion, mentioned 2 different things. 1, a job description, and then 2, the fact that our city code summarizes certain duties and obligations of certain significant roles, specifically the city attorney role and the city administrator role. We also have a code section that speaks about an assistant city attorney, but it basically says that person's supposed to do the same job as the city attorney. So those code sections are actually different from a job description, because those code sections are law, city law. A job description, by contrast, would just be an employment policy. Okay. More specifically to your question, yes, there are written job descriptions for, I will say, many city positions. I do not know if there's one for every city position. Even more specifically to your question, there are drafts or close to finalized versions of job descriptions for the 3 positions that Ms. Morales now formally, has been recognized as occupying. Whether those will be going forward characterized and actually physically written up as separate job descriptions or as one kind of big combined job description for her new position, that decision's not yet been made. But that would be something, job descriptions are something that is for management to control, not the city council to control. The code, as I said earlier, is the law, is for the city council to control. The final point I guess I'll say is the concept of job descriptions and the content of them is something that I, Ms. Morales, and the city administrator plan on getting to. It would be premature to do that fully yet because we're trying to get some of our code sections changed first. And frankly, I'm not going to have time to get to it unless and until some of our pending lawsuits go away. But job descriptions and even as to employee regulations and rules, that's all on our back burner to get to update, fix, and make better at some point. So that's a long-winded answer to your question of, yeah, there's some job descriptions that are out there, but it's really not up to the council. It's up to city management. And even the job descriptions that are out there perhaps need some still fine tuning. Now I'll tell you the one that myself, the city administrator, the mayor, and Ms. Morales have worked on for her. It's 3 or 4 pages long and has a lot of duties on it. But she's been doing all those duties again since late May, or most of them since late May. Some of them she took on in September.
Just tonight, we've been talking about it for 15 minutes. I don't understand how come we don't have them all done yet. I do understand it's an administrative responsibility and not ours. With the list of titles and for the example of I'm working on this paragraph, the one about hiring somebody at the lowest rate, and that it seems that if we have rather than saying hired at the rate of the lowest paid person in the building, to somehow word it at similar to somebody in a comparable position. And I don't know exactly how you would define what a comparable position. Who do you compare a battalion chief to? Would that be, I don't have any answers. I'm good with where we're at. I'm just not sure where to the finish line.
Yeah, on the specific hypothetical about the battalion chief, I can tell you that is a one that's probably going to be least likely to be problematic for a couple of reasons. One, I doubt we would ever be able to get somebody to agree to fill that role unless part of the agreement was we immediately got the city council to approve a real salary for that role. And also, two, the legal relationship of our city to the fire district has to be considered. And that is effectively 60% of the money for wages for fire district employees, for fire employees, let's say, comes from the county, whereas only 40% of it comes from the city. So if we ever get a fire battalion chief and come back to the city and say, please approve X amount of salary, really only 40% of it comes out of the city's pocket. 60% of it comes elsewhere. So I think the likelihood would be that probably the city council would approve that new salary. So that hypothetical about a high-ranking person at the fire department coming to pass, I think is probably less likely. I think the more likely one is the one that, and I don't have a crystal ball either, but the one I sketched out earlier about we're doing a de facto reorganization here at City Hall. We're going to keep Ms. Morales in these roles indefinitely, but we're hopeful that the public records requests and some of the other burdens will stay at their current level rather than their previously heightened level. But if we get into a scenario where we need some more help, I don't want the mayor and administrator to be hamstrung such that they cannot hire a new city hall person until the council approves it. So that's why I've written it the way I have, that they can hire a new city hall person in a completely new role, but they just got to make sure that person's not paid more than the lowest person on the totem, unless and until we might get council's approval. So I follow your concept about an equivalent role, but the difficulty with that is when we don't know what these new roles might be, it's kind of really impossible to specify what they would be equivalent to. A lot of this is just, I think, vestiges of whoever was writing our code back in the late 80s and writing some things without foresight for how stuff might change over a 4 decades since.
Mr. Peters has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I just, listening to the discussion here, I think, to summarize it, it seems to me that this is more or less a stopgap, so that department heads, supervisors have to go and think about what the positions are, and so that the mayor and city administrator don't kind of run ahead of the council in essence, and that it forces us as department heads and supervisors to bring this to the mayor and the city administrator's attention, and then bring forth the actual ordinance to add the position to the roster as if it were, to put it to briefly. That's just my commentary on it.
I think that's well stated. Writing it the way I've written it is trying, as I said, to give people a roadmap for the future. So if somebody new gets hired at a new position, hopefully, I mean, if I'm still around, this will occur, but hopefully somebody will pull out the code and say, hey, looks like we got to go to council if we want to pay this person more than the lowest level position. And thus, hopefully, we won't be here in this scenario again, 12 years where things have not been updated to correspond with how things have been happening. Rather, we would be coming back time and time again each time we make any sort of significant change, like adding a new position or increasing a salary.
All right, thank you, Rob. So we have a motion. You guys have to help me out here. We have a motion to approve by, do we remember, by Roger?
I think it was Roger, and then seconded by Cliff.
And a second by Cliff. Roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Yes.
Councilmember Matson,
Yes.
Councilmember Vargas,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bell,
Yes.
Councilmember Costello.
Yes.
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, council, and thank you for your patience. And as I said, you can expect some similar forays to this, perhaps before the end of the year. But those of you that will be with us early next year, also in early next year, because I have discovered other scenarios that need to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports, public appearances, we have none. Reports and announcements. Let's go to Chief Ling.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Cliff, first of all, for you, just for your knowledge, we do have job descriptions for every position at the fire department, and I think most of our departments do have job descriptions written. I won't speak for everybody, but we do. So that's from volunteer all the way up through myself, just to clear that up. For everybody, I've said it before, it hasn't changed here. We're busy, call volume's going up. I haven't really put my finger on why yet, except that the hospital keeps taking people. So, well, at least to the triage, not necessarily inside. But so we're still getting a lot of call volume. We've had several county-wide projects going on that I've been involved in, and I think I've talked to you a little bit about this. Our ambulance issue, communications committee with the radio towers and our radios, dispatch issues we're working on. Yesterday we had a very lengthy meeting with stakeholders in the valley about our ambulance response model And I think we've come up with some pretty good solutions, working with dispatch and the hospital and the other stakeholders. So hopefully we'll see some improvement in our ambulance response. Even with our huge shortage of EMTs and paramedics right now, it's a big issue I want you to be aware of now. You'll hear about it some more later, but it's countrywide right now. It's nationwide. It's a big problem. They're hiring paramedics right out of school before they even get a chance to get to an ambulance company. Fire departments that can and can afford them are snagging them up. So anyway, we're dealing with that. Trying to work on some solutions there. We have some new programs we're talking about. We spent a long time today talking about enhancing our volunteer program because, as you're well aware, if you've seen the news at all, with this new mandate, we're down quite a bit right now. So Mickey, Chief Gilly, and I have been working on some ideas, and I think we're coming up with some possible solutions to help the scenario. Other than that, we're just we're beating along, trying to do the best we can. The volunteers that have stayed and are committed are we're very, very grateful. They've been picking up a lot of the slack for our lack of response or lack of responders. So a big shout out to our volunteers. They've been doing a great job. Any questions for me? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. Chief Crispin.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, thank you very much for your continued support. No one at the police department takes that for granted, and we appreciate all that you do. Just to give you a quick update, it's been a long night. Joe and I attended a CIA online conference today on the legislative changes. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with Joe soon and going through what we heard today. To be honest, I didn't hear anything that surprised me. Last Monday, members of the PD met with students in 3 of the forensic science classes at the high school. We talked about how science is used in policing, from DNA and fingerprint to just interviews and other technologies, and then what it becomes to what it takes to become a forensic scientist, or what it takes to become a police officer, and the differences between those things. The students enjoyed the presentations, and we had a really good time too. Your police department continually searches for opportunities to connect with all levels of the community. And so that was just one example of some of the things that we've been doing recently. The police department is ramping up and preparing for the 2nd annual food drive, benefiting the Selah Food Bank. And you may remember last year we collected about 3,000 pounds of food and almost $2,600 in cash. We hope to collect even more this year to help provide for local residents during the holidays. Our partners at Ray's, IGA, and the Selah Grocery Outlet are happy to host this again this year. We'll be at Grocery Outlet on Saturday, November 13th from noon to 5 p.m. And then again at Ray's, IGA on November 20th from noon to 5. And we hope you'll stop by and see us. And I'll challenge the fire department now to come on over and join us, Chief Lang. Bring all your friends and family with you.
You got it.
All right. And then finally, as Katrina mentioned, on Thursday, December 2nd, we will host a public open house to discuss the new proposed Selah Law and Justice Center. Over the coming weeks, you'll see that we are going to take a very creative approach to invite our community to join us at the Civic Center to discuss the law and justice construction project and to provide their input to the process. We want to see an overwhelming response to our invitation to this public open house. And so I am sure you'll be there as well. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the planning department, I don't have much to share with you. We're going to be kind of winding down. Usually November is where we kind of button up everything. We completed our comp plan amendments. Thank you to all who participated, as tortured as it may have been or seemed. We will go and forward those ordinances on to the state once the appeal period is done. And that concludes the major planning applications that we'll be bringing to you before the end of the year. From there, we'll be transitioning to working with our public works manager, Rocky Wallace, and on a number of different public works projects. The one that you may see before the end of the year is the ADA transition plan. So I've done some work on that and getting some of the policies and goals that we have into that plan. And then our engineering tech, Matthew, has been walking the streets and taking inventory of all of our ADA ramps and areas of low or no sidewalk. And so we'll be bringing to you at least a draft plan probably and a study session. I'll let Rocky maybe go into more details on what his plans are moving forward on that. Other items that we'll be starting to work on is the city administrator is asked, as well as the mayor, that we take a look at some of our planning application processes, and specifically they would like us to look about bringing back and the hearing examiner more into some of our land use application processes, specifically long plats and rezones. This is because a hearing examiner is generally an attorney who is well aware of land use law with regard to the matters, and is a little bit more sophisticated than your average planning commission. And so it provides protection to the city in its decisions and the recommendations that it brings to the city council. So we will be working on revising those different land use applications. There are also other portions of the city code, like Rob mentioned, that have not been updated in the planning department. Like when we were dealing with the sign ordinance, the appeal sections of our code, which Rob is going to continue to work on. And there are other processes for public notice and such that haven't been amended for 10 years plus, and there's been significant changes in the way that the state requires us to meet these requirements for our land use applications. So that's what we'll be working on through the winter months, and hopefully be bringing you some of those ordinances sometime after the first of the year. Other than that, code compliance wise, our stormwater officer who doubles as our code enforcement has been getting out and looking at a number of different properties that need some help in nudging them towards keeping their properties cleaned up. I won't mention specifics, but so she's out there. Plus she's been involved with HLA in putting together our stormwater plan that we're going to be working on over this upcoming year. So other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So an update on the Valley View Third Southern project. I have no update at this time. It is still in the right-of-way phase. I have not seen the documents from Yakima County for my review. The Crusher Canyon Sewer Project is approximately 60%. The design was sent to Yakima County engineer Matt Petrushevitz, and I will be having a meeting with Matt to discuss this project this week, since it is outside of the city limits but within the urban growth area. The wastewater collection improvements project, as Mr. Peters stated, we are working on a Title II ADA transition plan. After my meeting this morning with our representative from USDA RD, as part of the civil rights portion of this, we will have to complete an ADA transition plan. And so thankfully we have been ahead of this project, and I am positive Public Works will get it to you for approval in December. The water service meter project. Thank you for approving the contract with the Public Works Board. We will get that signed by the mayor hopefully tomorrow or the next day, and then we can move forward with that project. The Fremont sidewalk project, I have no update at this time. It is still in the 30% stage. Natchez Avenue sidewalk project. Public Works is working on a construction schedule for the moving of the water meters and boxes in the sidewalks ahead of the project. Just to review, the curb and gutter will be moving to approximately 2 feet, 2.5 feet, so that we can accommodate for the larger vehicles that are being purchased by the community at this time. And so with that, we need to move the water meters towards the buildings more. We also have a hydrant that needs to be moved, and we're going to move it across the road from where its current position. And that is between the Jim Clements Way and First Avenue. The question that council asked at the last council meeting as far as the USDA grants and HLA's familiarity with it. Just as an update, HLA has since 2010 had 16 USDA grants, and that their combined total is over $44 million. So hopefully that gives you some easement of where we are. Also, council asked if the animal control vehicle was on the surplus list, and I will pass it back to Chief Chrisman if he would like to answer that.
Thanks, Rocky. Yeah, it was on the list to go to surplus.
Thank you, Chief. And then from today's meeting, what I've taken is, and I don't want to misinterpret, but is the dog park something that the council would like to see on a Parks and Recs plan survey for the updated Parks and Recs plan that will be happening in 2022?
Looks like Suzanne shaking her head, yes.
Maybe
Mike is.
Maybe we could get a show of hands for Rocky.
Okay, thank you. I will make sure that is on the survey questions for the Parks and Rec plan.
I think Joe wants to walk his dog on his lunch hour.
One other thing that council requested was confirmation that the Public Works surplus or the vehicles that the city was surplusing would be available for review by the community. If you go to the Public Works webpage on the city's website, if you go under the current surplus, there is a link that will take you to the auction, and you have the ability to review all of the auction items that are there. So I hope that meets council's request. The city attorney and I are working on documentation to get the city approved for the public surplus. And so that would allow the city to hold our own auctions, but it would be a third party that conducts those auctions, and it takes the liability away from the city as long as the documentation is correct. Are there any questions?
Doesn't look like it, Rocky. Thank you. All righty. I think I got all the staff. Councilwoman Manson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Wednesday, I attended the Zoom meeting for the YCOG General Membership Meeting. We had a couple really good speakers. It was a really good program. There will be executive committee elections in February of 2022. And then the nominating committee will be appointed at the December general membership meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Councilwoman Vargas.
I have no report.
Thank you. Councilman Costello.
No report.
Thank you. Councilman Peterson.
No report.
Thank you. Councilman Bell.
Yes, Chief Chrisman's already covered the December 2nd meeting, but we had one scheduled for this week, the 28th. Do not show up at the Civic Center for that. It's not being conducted. And I'd like to remind everyone that we have several issues on the ballot, so please vote.
Thank you. Councilman Wickenhagen.
No report.
Thank you. Mr. Case.
I have no public report.
Mr. Henney.
Real quick, tomorrow I'm speaking at the Selah Chamber of Commerce meeting, and we'll be going over kind of what the city has been up to, projects for next year, and update on some of the other departments' happenings. Thank you for N5. Gee, Rob, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Appreciate all that. Yeah, the WCIA, we had a training on PD. It was talked about use of force, probable cause. It was very enlightening to me. I can see where the police department's going to have some serious training coming up, because it really changes a lot of aspects of policing, right of entry, how they pursue. And so I can see, without some good training, that the police officers could very well be second guessing on what it is they can and can't do. So that'll need to happen. And I had another WCIA training on human resources, and boy, that could be a sticky wicket too. And I'm really glad that Teresa's going to be doing that. After that training, I sat down with her and discussed some of the items, and she was up to speed on all that. So I'm thankful for that, and I appreciate you guys allowing us to regroup and get this position together. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Welcome.
Just a reminder, council members, the SDA has their after council meeting at their office tomorrow from 2 to 4. If anybody can attend, it would be appreciated by Katrina. So, and that's all I have. Long night.
Move to adjourn.
Pardon me? Did you actually say motion to adjourn?
I did.
Okay, it's been moved to adjourn by Cliff.
A second.
Seconded by Jackie. All those in favor? Looks like it's unanimous. We are now adjourned. Have a great evening.
Thank you.